Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk with y'all for a little bit about Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Milwaukee Bucks have been one of the more discussed teams in the NBA as a whole this season. They've been one of the most interesting squads to follow this entire year. And that was always going to be the case because they made the blockbuster deal of the offseason, adding Damian Lillard, giving Giannis another superstar to play with for the first time in his career, and giving Dame easily the best teammate that he's ever had. It was a massive move and one that was seemingly necessary after the embarrassing first round loss at the hands of the Miami Heat in the first round last year, losing as the number one overall seed going into the playoffs. So adding Dame alongside Giannis, Khris Middleton, Brook Lopez seemingly made them a juggernaut of a squad. A lot of people thought it's going to be the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks as the two top teams in the Eastern Conference, and that the eventual Eastern Conference Finals was going to be those two teams. Everything else was kind of a formality up until that point to see which of the two juggernauts could come out on top. But it hasn't exactly been the season that a lot of people were expecting for the Milwaukee Bucks. It started off with Adrian Griffin, their new head coach who they hired after firing Budenholzer this offseason, getting fired himself partway through the season while the Bucks were the 2 seed. It shocked a lot of people, not necessarily because he was doing a great job as the coach, but because they were so good up to that point, at least in terms of wins. If you look deeper under the surface, a lot of the wins were these big-time comebacks against worse competition. The defense was horrific, and a bunch of reports started to come out that he lost the locker room. There was that one moment towards the beginning of the season where he and Terry Stotts had some kind of argument, and it led to Terry Stotts leaving the coaching staff before the year even began. And there were multiple times throughout the season where players had to tell him, hey, this is how we need to scheme, this is what we need to do to be more successful. It just didn't seem like he was ready for this head coaching gig, and firing a head coach midway through the season is rarely something that eventual championship teams do. Alongside that, Damian Lillard, the superstar they acquired in the offseason, hasn't been up to typical Damian Lillard standards. He's giving them only 24.2 points per game, shooting just 42% from the field, just 34.5% from deep, and his defense on the season has been really, really rough. I will give him credit, it's been better as of late. He's been putting in a lot of effort on that end, but overall, it's been one of the worst statistical seasons of Dame's career ever since he got to this All-Star, All-NBA level. And we knew the numbers were going to take a bit of a hit from last season. I mean, now he's playing alongside Giannis and Khris and Brook as opposed to the guys he was playing with in Portland last year. But the efficiency wasn't supposed to take this kind of hit. If anything, I expected him to be right around the same level or even more efficient because now he had more help with Giannis taking a lot of that defensive pressure off him that he faced in Portland last year and really for a majority of his career. I do know that Dame's been going through some personal stuff. He recently talked with someone, I can't remember who it was, and said that it's pretty lonely in Milwaukee. He lived in Portland for so many years. All his friends and family are over there. I know he's going through a divorce as well, so there is definitely some personal stuff going on with Dame that I'm sure is affecting his play, and hopefully he's able to get back to the usual Dame level by the time the playoffs roll around. The defense as a whole has also been pretty rough on the season. It's gotten better as of late under Doc Rivers, but specifically under Adrian Griffin for majority of this year, it was non-existent. They're one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Pretty much any star player was just walking to the basket and destroying them on a night-to-night basis. Not going to win a championship with that type of defense, and probably not going to get that many wins. It was a miracle that the Bucks were having as much success as they were with how bad they were defensively. They've also had an issue a little bit with injuries this season, specifically to Khris Middleton. He continues to have the injury bug in his late career. He missed 18 games already so far this season. There's still time to go too, where I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up missing 20 to 25 games by the end of the season, and he's really important to what they do. So between the Doc Rivers, Adrian Griffin coaching situation, the terrible defense, Dame being pretty disappointing, and the injury bug, there's been a lot going on and a lot of reasons that the Milwaukee Bucks have been discussed a ton this season and are getting a lot of attention. But the big reason why the Bucks have stayed afloat despite the chaos isn't getting nearly as much attention as some of those other storylines. In the MVP race right now, there are 3 main names I see when I scroll Twitter. They're Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Luka Doncic, and all 3 of them are very deserving contenders. The MVP winner probably will come from that trio. They're all very deserving of the hype, but one guy who belongs way more in those conversations than he's actually mentioned is Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis is having an unbelievable season, and it feels like to me almost nobody's talking about what he's done so far. I made a video about this last year. I think I called it the Giannis Antetokounmpo problem. In that video, the problem I referred to was the fact fact that in that MVP race, he wasn't being discussed as a legitimate contender. A lot of the year, it was Embiid and Jokic, and they probably should have gone down as the top two finishers like they did. But Giannis wasn't ever seriously considered as an option, it felt like, for a lot of that second half of the season when he was putting up ridiculous numbers. The Bucks were the 1 seed, they were dealing with injuries, and it didn't really matter because Giannis was keeping them afloat. This year, we're seeing all these storylines taking place. The Bucks have been really dysfunctional, and yet they're still one of the better teams record-wise, mainly because of Giannis, who is in the midst of perhaps the most dominant season of his entire career, which is a lot to say for a guy who's been as dominant as Giannis has. Not to mention he's breaking records and he's making history in ways that I don't think a lot of people know because nobody's talking about it. On the season as a whole, Giannis is putting up 30.8 points per game, 11.3 rebounds, and 6.3 assists to go with 1.3 steals and a block per game, shooting 61.9% from the field, 30.1% from three, and 66.1% from the line. This is the second highest point per game average of his entire career, only behind last season, and it's barely behind last year. The highest assist mark of his career, the highest field goal percentage he's ever had. He's continued to level up despite being a two-time MVP already. He's third in the NBA in scoring and has the highest true shooting percentage in the NBA out of anybody putting up 25 plus points per game. So he's got both the volume and the efficiency to be up there with the best scorers in the league this season. One of the reasons for this unprecedented efficiency from Giannis is that he's brought back the three-point attempts. He's shooting just 1.7 per game, which is the lowest mark since his third season, all the way back in 2015-16. And he's really locked in on the fact that nobody can stop him from getting to the rim. There is no defense for a 7-foot, 250-pound guy with unreal athleticism, speed, strength, and touch, just barreling down the lane with ridiculous footwork too. He's gone into Shaq mode, where he's just attacking the basket, and it feels like he's dunking on pretty much anybody. It feels like he's more aggressive on the interior than ever, just bodying up with his strength, taking advantage of the extra spacing that he has now with Dame in town, as well as the overall spacing with the Bucks' high-powered three-point shooting offense. He is the best he's probably ever been, leading the league with over 20 points per game in the paint this season, averaging the most fast break points out of anybody per game. He's shooting 82.1% this year within 3 feet, so there's not only pretty much no way to stop him from getting to the rim, but there's no way to stop him when he actually does get to that spot. He's also having a better playmaking season than we've ever seen from him too, like I said, averaging a career high in assists, and it's become a really underrated aspect of his game. He's great at creating those advantages by attacking downhill and forcing double teams, forcing the defense to collapse, and he's only gotten better at finding the shooters on the perimeter, being a connector through passing with a guy that has so much gravity that requires so much attention. He's utilized that to his advantage, and he's improved his playmaking drastically over the course of his career. On a more individual night-to-night basis, he's been completely unstoppable. He's had 27 30-point games, 6 40-point games, 2 50 pieces, including a 64-point game against the Pacers, which, as you probably know, set the Milwaukee Bucks franchise record for points in a game, and he did it without hitting a single three. He's only had 8 games this season where he shot under 50% from the field, and he hasn't done that since January 22nd, a month and a half ago, and he shot over 60% from the field 34 times. He's having one of the most dominant interior scoring seasons I've ever seen. Even from the perimeter as of late, he's been cooking. The volume hasn't been great, but since January 15th, he's shooting 43% from deep. Again, he's not taking a lot of threes, but the fact that Giannis over any significant stretch is shooting like that from the outside means that there's truly no way to guard him. And of course, this is all in addition to the ridiculous Giannis defense that you're typically used to seeing. He's 91st percentile in defensive EPM this season, and that goes along with his 98th percentile offense. So he's in the 90 plus percentile in both those categories, one of just 5 players in the NBA to do so. So counting stats say he's breaking the league, advanced metrics say he's one of the best players in the world. Yet again, not that many people are talking about him. This is especially egregious because not only is Giannis having one of the best seasons in the NBA today, he's having one of the most efficient scoring seasons in NBA history. Amongst every player who has ever averaged 30 or more points per game, Giannis is currently on pace to finish with the highest field goal percentage, highest effective field goal percentage, and the 3rd highest shooting percentage in a season ever out of all of the people who have ever put up 30 or more points in a season. That's absurd. He's nearly a full 4 field goal percentage points better than Adrian Dantley, who's in second place in that regard. He's currently beating out unanimous MVP Steph, who is kind of the poster child for all-time efficient seasons in that effective field goal percentage department, and the only guys he's behind in true shooting percentage are Adrian Dantley and that Steph Curry season, which, by the way, Adrian Dantley should really get more love. I don't know why people don't talk about him more. Every time we see the most efficient seasons, he's somewhere on this list. But basically, Giannis is with the most efficient seasons ever with what he's doing this this year. So when I'm saying that Giannis is breaking records and having one of the most dominant seasons we've ever seen, I'm serious. Like, these are impossible numbers, and it feels like nobody knows about this. It's not being talked about. If I didn't make this video, I don't know how many of you watching it would have known that this is currently happening. I know there's a lot of great talent in the league and a lot to talk about with the Bucks, but Giannis' season is currently an all-time great one, and I feel like he's kind of been shoved to the side in NBA coverage and specifically in MVP conversations. He's one of 4 or 5 very viable candidates, and often I see people dismiss him saying that, oh, there's all this other stuff going on with the Bucks, he doesn't deserve that love, when in reality, if it weren't for him, the Bucks would be in a terrible position because of the coaching issues. Dame struggles a lack of depth to defense. There are so many problems that are going on with the Bucks overall this year, but Giannis is one of the few things that has gone right for them, and he has carried them on most nights this season. The stuff that Giannis has been doing has flown under the radar way too much this year, so I had to go ahead and make this video. I asked y'all if you wanted to see this in my video yesterday talking about the Eastern Conference. A lot of you commented yes, and it makes sense because Giannis deserves way more attention and love for what he's been doing so far this season, what he's really done over the course of his entire career. Giannis is an all-time great both at his position and in the NBA lore in general. He's having an all-time great scoring season, locking up defensively, and saving the Bucks from what otherwise may be one of the more disappointing seasons in modern NBA history. It's been amazing to watch. If you're not watching the Bucks or specifically seeing what Giannis is doing on a night in, night out basis, pay more attention, because I promise you're going to see some absolute greatness if you watch Giannis. It really does feel very reminiscent of Shaq, and I'm someone who started to watch hoops right around the tail end of Shaq's career because I'm only 23 years old, so I didn't see Shaq playing at the height of his powers back with the Lakers. I was like 3 at that time. But I imagine some of the stuff that Giannis is doing now is what it was like watching Shaq live in those games. So shout out to Giannis, the season that he's been having so far. I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the way, and specifically going into the playoffs. It feels like he's probably got a chip on his shoulder after the way they went out last year. If he can continue what he's been doing so far, if Dame can get it going, and they continue to build off the momentum they've had as of late, I believe they've won 5 straight games, we could be in for a ridiculous revenge performance from Giannis, and maybe he and the Bucks find a way to get back to the finals as he's pursuing his 2nd ring and another finals MVP, which would really stamp his legacy even further. For right now, though, I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And comment down below what you think about Giannis is doing at this point. Where would you have him in your MVP discussion? And do you agree with me that he's not being discussed nearly enough for what he's doing so far this season? I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.